Ruby found herself seated on her husband's lap, dressed in revealing attire. In this intimate moment, the scars on Ruby's back were discovered by Isaac, her spouse. With a hint of hesitation, Ruby revealed that these scars had resulted from childhood mishaps during her playful years. Intrigued by the peculiar marks, Isaac probed further, asking how she had acquired such scars while playing. Ruby's response was cautious but sincere as she explained her involvement in circus activities with her cousins when she was young. However, she mentioned that she was accidentally struck by the circus manager's whip due to his recklessness. Observing her vulnerability, Isaac tenderly attended to her, prompting Ruby to wonder if these scars repelled him. Yet, as she continued her revelation, Ruby found herself embracing newfound freedom and drew closer to Isaac, who, baffled by her actions, inquired about her intentions. Blushing, Ruby replied that she wanted to be close to him. As she moved nearer, Isaac probed further, asking if something was troubling her. Ruby hesitated, struggling to voice her thoughts, but Isaac interrupted her, offering reassurance that her past held little significance. He then proceeded to don his own attire and reclined on the bed. Beside him, Ruby couldn't shake the feeling of guilt for her earlier deception. As Isaac rested without reproach, she realized she needed to make amends. She hesitantly apologized to Isaac, expressing that she never meant to keep this from him. Intrigued, Isaac questioned her, prompting Ruby to admit her embarrassment about her past as a troublemaker. She didn't know how he'd react, so she had lied. She promised not to lie again. Isaac silenced her with a tender gesture, grasping her hand and pulling her closer. He assured her that it wasn't about that. He drew her into an embrace, their closeness kindling a warm blush on Ruby's cheeks. Puzzled by her behavior, Isaac remarked that he had noticed her seem to hold her breath when they were together. Her gaze met his, and Ruby responded that she was glad he believed her. Ruby felt a sense of relief but still wondered why he had forgiven her so readily this time. She asked hesitantly if he didn't hate her, to which Isaac's response left her slightly perplexed. He inquired whether it would be more worrisome for her if he did. Ruby couldn't help but find his answer somewhat enigmatic. She sighed and softly replied that if he was planning to stay there, could she go outside? Isaac's grip tightened around her, and he responded firmly with a no. She ventured further, asking if she could sleep beside him that night. Isaac's answer was casual, instructing her to do as she wished. As she lay beside him, Ruby couldn't help but admire her husband's slumbering form, his handsome features accentuated by repose. Her thoughts wandered as she whispered to herself, contemplating her abilities and her hesitation. She wished she could be more like Césaire or her family, with a clear purpose, feeling less alien and uncertain. In the quiet of the night, Ruby whispered her final words, bidding him good night. At night, amid the turmoil of people's cries and their escape from a raging fire, a woman stood on a terrace, her determination unwavering. An approaching figure was met with a smile by Ruby, who conveyed her anticipation of his arrival. Ruby's words were imbued with hope as she addressed the figure known as Isaac. Traces of blood marked his face, and his anger was palpable as he demanded an explanation for the situation. "What is the reason?" inquired Isaac. In response, Ruby, maintaining her confidence, retorted without revealing specific details, "Could you not discern it?" Frustrated by her seemingly evasive response, Isaac accused her of offering unfounded excuses and suggested an alternative course of action she could have taken. Acknowledging his point, Ruby conceded, "You're right, I could have confided in someone and betrayed my family." She smiled and added, "But I made this choice." However, her smile faded as she disclosed a troubling truth. "My cunning brother orchestrated the Princess of Omerta's murder solely because of her marriage. It was a bizarre situation. He instructed me to maintain a passionless marriage, but I could not comply." The dramatic exchange continued, with Isaac expressing shock at Ruby's admission about his sister's murder. Her motives remained shrouded in mystery, but she hinted at a lack of animosity toward Isaac's sister. Furthermore, it was revealed that she had taken the Holy Grail from Isaac, and they were technically still married due to an unsigned marriage annulment. The tense confrontation escalated as Isaac presented a blood-stained sword, and Ruby accepted it with defiance, as if it were a wedding gift, seemingly resigned to her fate. Isaac exclaimed in disbelief, "You've deceived me all this time, even killed my family, and yet you dare to claim we are still married." Ruby responded with a voice tinged with irony, "That is what validates our legitimate marriage, our dramatic conflict. I dreamed of turning this wretched place into a sea of blood every day. Did you know that you helped make that dream a reality?" Isaac declared his willingness to do anything for Ruby, to which she admitted, with a hint of remorse, "I'm sorry, I have spent my life testing you, seeing if you'd stay by my side until the end." She briefly closed her eyes and said, "This is the last wish of someone on the brink. Don't hesitate, I love you. Suddenly, Ruby awoke, her mind racing. She voiced her wonder at the peculiar dreams she had just experienced. Isaac inquired if she had had a nightmare, and Ruby questioned his wakefulness. Isaac proposed the idea of sharing a meal and regularly visiting the holy temple, surprising Ruby. She was taken aback and speculated about Isaac's motives, pondering if they were related to their first night together and if there was a concealed agenda involving the temple and Borgia's spies. Ellen appeared and mentioned having heard about their plan to visit the holy temple with Isaac. Ruby hesitated but forced a smile, confirming the accuracy of Ellen's statement. Ellen then revealed that letter is from Manhwa. Cardinal Valentino thought it should be delivered to you directly. Ruby was taken aback by this unexpected development. In a state of shock, Ruby gazed at the letter. Ellen, with concern, inquired about Ruby's well-being, asking if Ruby was not feeling well. To this query, Ruby responded with gratitude, expressing that she was indeed feeling unwell. She thanked Ellen for her concern. Later, in the garden, Ruby occupied herself by plucking a flower. Ellen observed that Ruby had been spending a considerable amount of time with Princess Arian recently. Ellen suggested that Ruby should consider visiting the palace, as she believed that Her Majesty would be delighted to have her there. Ruby hesitated before responding, seeking Ellen's opinion on the matter. Ellen reassured her, saying that she should pursue her desires without needing permission. She offered to accompany Ruby if she wished. Excitedly, Ruby asked if Ellen would truly go with her, to which Ellen affirmed her willingness. Ruby contemplated her desire to accompany Ellen to the holy temple, all the while worrying about potentially upsetting Her Majesty. She reflected on her past actions and her concerns regarding the priest of Erendil and Isaac's Longinus Knight's order. While deep in thought, she encountered a girl who mentioned that her uncle served as the palace's archbishop. In the meantime, Isaac arrived and inquired about Ruby's punctuality. Ruby presented Isaac with a garland they had crafted together with Ellen. Isaac commented that typically only children engaged in such activities. Ruby admitted that her hands were scratched from focusing solely on him. The girl playfully scolded Isaac, questioning his gruff demeanor toward his lovely wife. Isaac inquired about the reason for her presence. The girl explained that she had come to visit her uncle and had brought Lauren along, asking Isaac not to scold her. She believed that Lauren had something to say to Ruby, mentioning that she had heard her brother had been disrespectful to Ruby in the past. Now that they were there, she wanted him to apologize sincerely. Ruby hesitated, contemplating whether there was any reason to accept an insincere apology. She smiled and replied that she had no recollection of any disrespect. The girl praised Ruby's generosity but encouraged her not to hide her feelings, suspecting that she must have been hurt by Lauren's previous words. Ruby laughed and denied being upset. Lauren stepped forward and began to express remorse for his discourteous behavior. Isaac intervened, addressing Lauren as Lorenzo. Lauren, feeling uneasy, took a step back and tried to hide behind the girl. Ruby hesitated before saying that everything had turned out fine, so there was no need to worry. Isaac, still concerned, questioned Ruby's well-being. She assured him that she was indeed all right. Isaac found her condition peculiar, noting that she did not appear to have a fever but was breaking out in cold sweats. The girl suggested that perhaps Ruby had caught a cold from spending too much time in the garden. She expressed concern that Ruby might still be unwell. Isaac speculated about Ruby's actions, gently picking her up and expressing hope for a proper apology in the future. Afterward, the girl inquired if Isaac was upset with her. Frustrated, she muttered, questioning Ruby's status as the recipient of everyone's protection. In the embrace of Isaac, Ruby found herself suspended, her words escaping her lips as she remarked on her own perceived weightiness, politely requesting a pause. Her plea lingered momentarily before she continued, acknowledging her tendency to stumble and spill blood, reflecting on her actions with self-critique. She questioned the surprise in Isaac's demeanor regarding her posture, hinting at a desire to delve deeper into the matter. Ruby directed her gaze towards Isaac, her voice filled with enthusiasm as she openly admitted to finding their current situation exhilarating and expressed a certain fondness for him. In response, Isaac shifted the conversation, inquiring about Lorenzo's treatment of her. Startled by the sudden change in topic, Ruby hesitated before responding that she couldn't recall. Undeterred, Isaac asked about a song related to curly hair that he had heard rumors of, prompting Ruby's thoughts to race as she considered his knowledge of the unpleasant song. She reluctantly confirmed the existence of such a song. Isaac persisted, noting Ruby's prompt responses despite her claimed lack of recollection. Desperate to steer the conversation away, she asked about a previous offer he had made for lunch. Isaac confirmed the sincerity of the offer, and Ruby, feeling distressed, responded without revealing her true feelings. To divert her emotions, Ruby planted a kiss on Isaac's cheek and chuckled. In her internal musings, she reflected on her noble status and the impropriety of her current behavior in the sacred temple. She questioned Isaac's motives for bringing her there. A priest respectfully greeted Ruby and mentioned the special attention her sister had been extended by Cardinal Valentino. Ruby laughed and expressed her gratitude. The priest expressed concern over the impromptu visit, suggesting that adhering to customs would be wise due to her sister's status. Isaac, however, playfully dismissed tradition, claiming his wife wasn't feeling well. Ruby felt the strained atmosphere but couldn't understand why. She pondered whether Isaac's loyalty to the Kingdom of Britannia overshadowed his noble paladin status. The appearance of the Archbishop caught her attention. The priest invited Ruby and Isaac to a charity event during the upcoming feast of St. Agnes, suggesting their presence as newlyweds would be delightful. Ruby, feeling exhausted by the situation, questioned the priest's intentions. Later, during the feast of St. Agnes, Ivan greeted Ruby and expressed a preference for her to have come alone. Isaac overheard and responded calmly. Ruby chuckled hesitantly. In her internal monologue, Ruby lamented the unexpected attention Isaac received and acknowledged the plan's failure. She resolved to discreetly distance themselves from the temple. Ruby attempted to engage in conversation with Isaac, commenting on the lively atmosphere, to which he responded cynically. Andaman appeared and greeted Ruby, prompting a cheerful acknowledgement from her. Isaac's reaction was less favorable, and Andaman offered to fetch drinks for both of them. Ruby suggested she would also go, citing curiosity about a stone statue. Isaac questioned her actions, and Ruby assured him with a playful response. Isaac observed her silently, and Ruby couldn't resist asking if something was bothering him. With a smile, Isaac reassured her that nothing was amiss. Ruby's contemplations revolved around Isaac and his actions as he bent down to remove an item attached to her shoe. She expressed her curiosity aloud, prompting Andaman to respond, mentioning a suspicion about it being pomegranate juice. Ruby then made an observation about the liquid resembling spilled coffee, paralleling her own mishaps, which surprised Andaman. Ruby continued with her thoughts, suggesting humor in the situation. After a moment of hesitation, Andaman chuckled and admitted to occasionally sympathizing with the stone statue. The Honda ceremony, undergone by all of Erendel's apprentice paladins at least once, and its tendency to cause nosebleeds while standing still, was discussed as a testament to the importance of humility among true paladins. Ruby recalled Isuk's arrogance, inquired about the training process, and received Andaman's confirmation regarding the essential conditions of stamina and swordsmanship for a paladin. As the Archbishop arrived, he warmly greeted Lady Rebecca and extended an invitation to walk with him. Ruby noticed Isuk's absence and gestured farewell to Andaman, expressing her intention to depart. Andaman, bewildered, replied with an acquiescence. Ruby narrated her thoughts, emphasizing her desire to maintain distance from the temple while discreetly observing events to potentially uncover clues about an affair involving Caesar. The Archbishop mentioned his anticipation for her visit to the temple and acknowledged the difficulties she had faced. He voiced his concern for her mistreatment and hinted at Isuk's unjustified anger. Ruby teased the Archbishop and mentioned the special bond between her and Isuk, which he acknowledged with humility and generosity. They shared a friendly exchange, and Ruby thanked him for his words of encouragement. The Archbishop shared his past experiences, including a pilgrimage to Ramagna and his association with a Franciscan monastery, leading Ruby to contemplate the implications of a connection between him and her family. Shifting the conversation to the Duke, the Archbishop expressed his happiness at the Duke's safe return and inquired about the resolution of issues related to the Hameln estate. Ruby wondered about Isek's repeated presence and whether he suspected her of sharing gossip with the Archbishop. Ellen redirected Ruby's attention, suggesting the hiring of a new dedicated maid. Ruby was taken aback by the proposal, and Ellen elaborated on the idea, emphasizing the need for a maid without family ties. Freya endorsed the proposal, mentioning Marquis Puriana's connections and offering her assistance in the hiring process. Ruby saw this as an opportunity to avoid preconceived notions, considering her recent arrival. Freya offered to provide introduction letters for potential candidates, while Ellen advocated for younger candidates, and Freya argued for more mature individuals, considering Ruby's preferences. Suddenly, Freya's cough and spilled drink startled both Ellen and Ruby. Freya found herself on the ground after a tumble, and Ruby gallantly extended her hand to offer assistance. Ruby gently urged against panic, advising her not to succumb to fear. Blood trickled from the corner of Freya's mouth, but she managed a faint, enigmatic chuckle. Suddenly, Isaac materialized and rudely pushed Ruby aside, instructing Ruby to move. He initiated a detoxification process, activating a small panel on his hand to heal her, urgently calling out for Ivan. Meanwhile, Lorenzo assailed Ruby, voicing his long-standing suspicion that this charade would eventually unravel, revealing an act of feigned innocence. An unknown figure suddenly intervened, launching a retaliatory attack against Lorenzo, causing him to crumple to the ground. The newcomer quipped about Lorenzo's temporary lapse of senses, bowed deferentially, and implored Lady Rebecca for forgiveness. A commanding knight's voice echoed through the tumult, urging everyone to make their way to the temple swiftly, as lingering was perilous. Andaman acted swiftly, scooping up Ruby and guiding the people to safety while commanding the immediate blocking of Zone B. Suddenly, a monstrous creature materialized, and Andaman exclaimed at the breach of the temple, expressing disbelief that such abominations had infiltrated. Ruby later recalled that the tightly sealed door had reopened after what seemed like half a day. Fortunately, Freya had survived, but the truth regarding the poison incident remained elusive, with the person who had offered them wine having vanished without a trace. Following these events, the Duke approached Ruby and inquired about suspicions regarding Lady Freya's poisoning. Ruby responded thoughtfully, indicating her belief that Lady Freya had been the intended target from the outset. She noted that she and Ellen had also consumed the wine but suffered no ill effects. The Duke clarified that it wasn't poison but rather magok solution, a blend of magic stone and Holy Spirit stone, used as a lure in demon summoning. He mentioned the stringent process and relic license required to possess magok and revealed that all the magok stones stored within the temple had been accounted for. He turned to the Archbishop, implying the implication that the culprit was within their ranks. Ruby narrated with a touch of bitterness that now that everyone knew who was behind the incident, they would undoubtedly assume she was the orchestrator. Ruby recounted the historical narrative of the Borgia family's assassination with an air of secrecy, alluding to her own notoriety tied to her lineage. She further divulged that the Archbishop happened to be none other than Freya's uncle, making her a likely suspect if any fingers were pointed her way. The Duke, however, made it abundantly clear that he would not tolerate anything that implicated his daughter-in-law. He recognized Ruby as an Omerta family member, asserting that she need not justify herself, only to request any information she might possess. In response, Ruby found herself at a loss for words, acutely aware of the prevailing sentiments. She understood that many believed her actions stemmed from jealousy towards Lady Freya, fueling her inclination towards such a heinous act. The Duke swiftly dismissed these baseless claims and attempted to console Ruby, assuring her that he had not meant to inquire in such a harsh manner. Nonetheless, Ruby privately reflected on the pervasive suspicions surrounding her. Being the Pope's daughter, many speculated she could have access to the coveted magok stone at any time or have passed it to an accomplice in advance. The Duke, attempting to make amends, acknowledged his previous remarks and reiterated his respect for his daughter-in-law. He urged Ruby not to cry. Ruby mused on the fact that, despite her father's perspective, to others, she would always remain a stranger. She lay on her bed, contemplating various hypotheses. If the attack had been driven by resentment from the temple or the Furiana family, they must have acquired the magok stone from the black market, given its illegal status. Suspicion had swiftly fallen on her following Freya's injury. Ruby considered who stood to benefit from these circumstances and concluded that the motive might be tied to her relationship with her husband. She surmised that someone wished for her to divorce and return, making her a potential source of magok. It was evident that a family spy had leaked information about the temple, making the fourth hypothesis the most plausible. Ruby then shifted her thoughts to her husband, acknowledging that she had underestimated his history and obsessions. She pondered his current state of regret for how he had treated her. As Ruby grappled with her complicated circumstances and deteriorating health, the annual event loomed once more, marking the passing of another year since the tragedy. She had hoped that it would no longer haunt her. While taking a sip of water, she suddenly noticed something amiss and hurled the glass to the floor in frustration. Sand scattered across the room, leaving her to wonder why she was subjected to this torment, a mirror of the pain Freya must have endured. Ruby exclaimed that it was too much and that everyone in the family seemed to favor Freya. In a moment of emotional intensity, Ellen grabbed Ruby and demanded an explanation for her actions. Ellen's anger boiled over as she questioned whether Ruby sought attention or tried to sully herself through self-harm. Ellen confronted Ruby's apparent death wish and implored her to die quietly if she so desired. Ruby, with a rare display of vulnerability, confessed that this was the only aspect of her life she could control. Ellen was left in stunned silence, apologizing and exiting the room. Upon reflection, the injuries inflicted by habitual vomiting occupied Ruby's thoughts. The discovery of hidden harm stemmed from her close self-examination. Contemplation led her to ponder whether this newfound awareness hinted at a previous encounter with a similar ordeal, or if it related not to her but rather to Ellen. Following this inner contemplation, Ellen mentioned that a visit to the temple had been requested, suggesting they should go. Ruby's mind raced with thoughts of whether the Archbishop sought her presence, potentially in connection to the attempted poisoning of Freya. After a brief pause, Ruby agreed, expressing her gratitude to Ellen. Further musings led Ruby to consider the possibility of Cesar's involvement in the incident, raising the likelihood of the Archbishop's role as a spy. If this were true, he would be implicated in harming his own cherished niece. Memories of past visits with Isuk resurfaced, albeit distant ones, leading her to question Isuk's apparent indifference towards her. These doubts prompted thoughts of a necessary face-to-face conversation. Meanwhile, Lorenzo and Andaman engaged in an unnoticed conversation, which Ruby surreptitiously eavesdropped on. Andaman inquired about Lorenzo's sister's well-being, to which Lorenzo responded with a sharp retort, questioning Andaman's motives. Andaman persisted, suggesting Lorenzo's presence by his sister's side in sensitive matters. Lorenzo's response was swift and heated, challenging Andaman's courage and character, while Andaman calmly emphasized the importance of not involving innocent parties and focusing on trading. The conversation escalated with Lorenzo's anger and accusations. Ruby grappled with inner turmoil, considering her next steps and longing for someone to truly understand her. Her thoughts turned to an enigmatic figure who had shown kindness and hesitancy, believing in her and offering protection. And she wondered why this person felt different from everyone else, giving her a glimmer of hope. Suddenly, Ruby's attention was diverted by a sound, and Popo appeared. Overwhelmed with emotion, she called out to him, expressing concern about their proximity to the temple and her physical discomfort. Popo, without a word, carried Ruby on his back and began to run. Surprised and grateful, Ruby questioned whether Popo was taking her with him. As they fled, she whispered, contemplating her potential disappearance and its impact on others, ultimately deciding to go with Popo. Ivan presented a small mirror to Isaac, remarking that his ferocious counterpart's daily torment might remain unfathomable to those with a conscience. He questioned the possibility of simply closing one's eyes. In response, the mirror was shattered by Isaac, who retorted that concern had never been solicited. Ivan persisted, suggesting that the manifestation of 3 days without sleep could only be a protest against inner worries. Isaac replied, "That's in the past." Ivan commented that her sudden disappearance remained inconclusive, with the city guard responsible for the search. He mentioned the criminal portrait prepared as instructed by Princess Ellen. Gently, Ivan added, "He understands their distress, it's about Freya." Isaac responded, "Not particularly." Ivan prodded, "Then why that behavior?" Isaac narrated his thoughts, revealing that he had no choice but to stand still, unable to decipher the meaning behind those words and actions. Exhaustedly, he admitted to Ivan, "I don't know." Ivan accused, "Such dullness." Is this for his wife and his thoughts? Isaac recalled the haunting image of that day, the despair and hopelessness. He reflected, if he hadn't stopped the manticores that day, if Freya's blood hadn't touched the Magok stone, it was for her, not anyone else. He thought she'd understand if he told her later, if he knew her. Ivan confessed, he's not alone with these doubts. Even passers-by suspect the Borgias. Isaac noted, until the in-laws' family dared to use the Magok stone, raising suspicions. They tested the Britannia Horseman family's members. Ivan acknowledged, "I've heard about that." "So, your in-laws are no longer suspects." Isaac stood up and stated, "That should have been the first thing to say." He continued, "The Magok stone is already being sold on the black market, so he can't solely suspect the temple." Ivan asked, "What if, during the investigation, your wife is revealed as the culprit?" Isaac fell silent. Ivan contemplated the strange unease, realizing that Isaac's motives weren't solely about apprehending the criminal. If the Temple of Ramagna or anyone linked to his wife were implicated, it was to be eradicated without a trace. Ivan posed the question, "What if your wife is the culprit?" Isaac replied, "I don't care." It doesn't matter. Ivan couldn't discern any emotion in Isaac's eyes, only a twisted, fanatical belief. He pondered, does it make sense to claim it has nothing to do with it? Freya, nobody else, she nearly died. How can he not connect his wife to this? Suddenly, a paladin rushed in and reported, Sir Isuk, Princess Alenia's message has arrived. But your wife has disappeared. Isaac was shocked. In a dimly lit cave during the daytime, Ruby slowly regained consciousness and opened her eyes. She wondered about the source of the voice she heard. Her gaze fell upon a monstrous creature devouring a horse nearby. She contemplated whether to feign death. Suddenly, a figure named Popo appeared, carrying food. Ruby was taken aback, seeing that the monster and Popo were friends. As Popo offered her food, Ruby decided to eat it, fearing that refusing would disappoint him. She remarked, the food is delicious, while eating, bringing immense joy to both Popo and the monster. Ruby suggested, let's eat together. Outside the cave, an observer noted the scene and declared, undoubtedly, she's a witch. In the midst of a forest saturated by rain, Ivan, adopting a contemplative tone, expressed doubt regarding the presence of the elusive figure they sought, while also inquiring about any progress in their search. Isaac, on the contrary, opted for silence as his response. Ivan, narrating the unfolding situation, lamented the passing of 3 days since the discovery of the Duchess's shoe in the same vicinity. The entire force of the capital had been mobilized in pursuit of her. If, indeed, she had been dragged into this unforgiving forest, the implications were grave. The suggestion was raised by Ivan that perhaps it was time to consider halting their search. In a subtle correction, Isaac interjected, 4 days. Contemplating the situation further, Isaac pondered the perplexing disappearance of a noble lady who had always been accompanied by her retinue. Her absence had remained unnoticed for half a day. The enigma surrounding her vanishing left him questioning the parties responsible. Was it the Archbishop who had summoned her or the indifferent household servants? Did Alenia's belated discovery bear any connection to her obligations towards Freya? If not, the responsibility rested squarely on his own shoulders, as he came to realize his failure to comprehend her treatment all this time. This potential misunderstanding weighed heavily on his conscience, leading him to conclude that the fault was his own. The household servants, especially the head maid, who had cared for Alenia as a mother, had always exhibited unwavering loyalty to the Omerta family. Isaac had never truly considered the implications of their allegiance. At the recent birthday celebration, he had overlooked Alenia's reckless behavior due to his affection for the family. It had been a grave oversight, and he admitted that emulating his father's actions was far from desirable. Rejecting the marriage had seemed like the righteous course of action, but he now realized the unintended consequences of his decisions. Regretfully, he acknowledged that there were unanswered questions and unspoken words, much like his comrades Ivan and others who were not present to openly discuss these matters. However, his determination to not abandon Alenia remained steadfast. In the face of uncertainty regarding her fate, he clung to the faintest glimmer of hope. As hope dwindled, he found solace in prayer, wondering what hidden truths lurked in the depths of the night when all else lay dormant. The elusive nature of these thoughts bore heavily upon him. Interrupting his reverie, a knight approached and addressed him as Sir Isaac. Ivan sought to learn the knight's purpose, prompting the revelation that they had encountered a poacher who had been uttering strange words upon regaining consciousness. Suspicions arose that he was attempting to evade capture. The poacher quickly interjected, vehemently denying any such intentions and instead referring to Isaac's age. Ivan turned to the knight, seeking clarification, and discovered that the poacher was alluding to the Banshee, a mythical entity whose mournful cries were said to foretell impending doom. A sense of foreboding pervaded the atmosphere as the poacher and his companion voiced their apprehensions about confronting the witch with just the two of them. They resolved to retreat and summon their comrades. Suddenly, a beast materialized behind them, sending shock coursing through both men. During the radiant daylight hours, a profound sense of joy radiated from Ruby as she exclaimed her sheer amazement at the breathtaking abundance of fruits that surrounded her. The orchard seemed like a haven of nature's generosity, and Ruby couldn't help but marvel at the vivid colors and fragrant aromas that enveloped her. With utmost generosity, Ruby began to pluck ripe fruits from the bountiful trees and shared them with the dear friends of Popo. Their faces lit up with gratitude, and a warm sense of camaraderie enveloped the group as they indulged in the succulent offerings. It was in these moments of sharing that contemplation blossomed regarding the endearing nature of this unlikely companionship. As Ruby continued her narrative, a profound sense of reflection unfolded within her. She couldn't help but ponder the evolution of her emotions since meeting Popo and Griffin. She realized with certainty that the grip of fear, which had once tightly bound her, seemed to have gradually dissipated under the nurturing influence of these loyal companions. Yet, the orchard was not without its mysteries. Occasionally, the presence of other curious monsters was noted, their inquisitive gazes fixed upon Ruby and her friends as if they had gathered to observe a peculiar phenomenon. This sparked speculation within Ruby's thoughts about Rebecca's latent abilities and the potential for them to be influenced by her presence. One thing, however, remained crystal clear: the monsters had undeniably developed a deep affection for Ruby. With a sense of impending rain and a desire to seek shelter, Ruby announced her decision to return to the cave. Inwardly, her thoughts lingered on whether Isaac had become aware of her absence, and the doubts that clouded his efforts in searching for her. She couldn't help but contemplate the possibility that even upon her return, full acceptance might remain elusive. In the midst of these ponderings, the ancient temple stood as a solitary refuge to safeguard her identity. She acknowledged the inevitable pursuit of Cessair and the inherent risks of their current location, along with the uncertain disposition of all the monsters they had encountered. Despite these concerns, Ruby found herself leaning towards the choice of continuing to evade her pursuers alongside Popo and Griffin. Suddenly, an excruciating pain coursed through Ruby's body, forcing her to the ground. In her disoriented state, she stumbled upon the entrance to a hidden cave. Darkness enveloped her, impairing her vision. Nearby, the cheerful play of Popo and Griffin near a dazzling jewel caught her attention. As she picked up the glistening ruby, astonishment washed over her. Could it be that she had stumbled upon the fabled mine of legend? Curiosity surged as she detected movement in close proximity. Cautiously, she extended her hand to touch it, leading to the startling materialization of a majestic dragon before them. A knight inquired of Isaac whether he genuinely believed the words of those poachers. In Isaac's narrative, the tale of a blonde witch was recounted, and it was explained that they claimed the witch had ventured into the restricted area. Andaman chimed in, affirming Isaac and mentioning that even if their claims held a grain of truth, the likelihood of that woman being his wife remained remote. Isaac replied confidently, indicating that there was a need to confirm it themselves and suggesting that if anyone persisted in complaining, they were free to return. Another knight questioned the reason behind bringing only them along, expressing the thought that a larger search party might be more effective. Isaac expressed skepticism, stating that he didn't trust them. The knights exchanged puzzled glances, with one remarking that perhaps he was acting irrationally, and that sleep deprivation may have taken its toll. In his narrative, Isaac acknowledged his own sense of madness and realized the peril they faced by entering the restricted area. He pondered the unprecedented circumstances and noted how she always thrust herself into danger when monsters appeared. Sergei's words planted seeds of doubt, making his suspicions grow stronger. Ivan interjected, mentioning that he had an ominous feeling and pointing out that Rom's den was nearby, suggesting that if the lady truly entered there, she would have arrived by now. Suddenly, a mysterious noise interrupted them, striking fear into their hearts. On the other hand, deep within the ominous mine, Ruby, her heart pounding with fear, found herself in the presence of the mighty dragon. Her trembling voice quivered with a mix of terror and apology as she addressed the colossal creature, her words a hesitant murmur in the oppressive darkness that surrounded them. She confessed her profound ignorance about how they had ended up in this dire situation, while the dragon's immense form loomed before her, its eyes blazing with fiery fury. Ruby's voice grew stronger, albeit still shaky, as she implored the dragon to depart quietly and spare their lives. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead as she desperately tried to maintain eye contact with the fierce beast. In a sudden, heart-stopping moment, the dragon's massive claw seized Ruby by the tail, sending electric shivers down her spine. Her thoughts raced, and the horrifying notion of becoming the dragon's next meal sent a cold chill through her entire body. This was not how she envisioned her life's end. Yet, just as Ruby's hope began to wane, Popo and Griffin, her steadfast companions, sprang into action. They launched a daring and heroic attack on the dragon, distracting the creature from its impending prey. Ruby's voice turned frantic as she urgently shouted at them to flee, her instincts telling her that the dragon's focus was now solely on her. Trembling and in a trembling voice, she implored her friends to save her from her impending doom. Miraculously, the dragon, perhaps swayed by Ruby's desperate pleas, released its grip, gently lowering her to the cold, rocky ground. Ruby couldn't help but wonder if, in some way, the dragon had understood her words. Seizing this uncertain opportunity, she cautiously stepped forward, finding herself face to face with the towering beast. With bated breath, Ruby nervously stated her intention to leave and pleaded with the dragon to stand aside. The dragon, in response, let out a thunderous roar that reverberated through the cavern, leaving Ruby to wonder whether it was merely toying with her emotions. Desperation welled within Ruby as she declared her unwavering need to escape this perilous situation. Once again, the dragon let out a deafening roar, its intentions shrouded in mystery. However, just as hope began to fade, the timely intervention of Griffin and Popo whisked Ruby away to safety, leaving her both relieved and bewildered. Exhausted and bewildered, Ruby couldn't help but mutter about the dragon's strange and enigmatic behavior. As she did, soft snowflakes began to fall gently around her, a stark contrast to the darkness of the mine. Ruby couldn't recall the last time she had seen snow, and a sense of melancholy washed over her. Suddenly, a voice, faint yet unmistakable, called out to her from the shadows, prompting shock and disbelief. Doubts crept into her mind as she wondered if it could truly be real. Deep down, though, a glimmer of hope flickered within her heart, for even in the face of unimaginable adversity, there was still room for the extraordinary to unfold. Isaac and Ruby found themselves facing each other, their eyes locked in an intense gaze. Ruby's astonishment was palpable as an exclamation left her lips, questioning the unexpected presence of Popo and Griffin, who bristled with anger. In response, Isaac's hand firmly grasped his sword as he issued a stern warning, urging them to maintain distance. Ruby's voice carried a sense of urgency as she pleaded for them not to approach and implored to be left alone. A contemplative silence enveloped Isaac as he attempted to bridge the emotional gap between them. His mind raced with memories of their past encounters, each tainted by the web of lies Ruby had spun, always hidden behind her warm smile. He wondered how different things might have been if he had probed deeper, understanding the extent of her suffering and discomfort. Had fear of him always lingered within her, or had she ever truly felt at ease? Ruby, still anxious, raised her voice once more, instructing them not to move. Her thoughts raced as she started to run, contemplating a desperate desire to escape her current existence. She pondered the haunting memories of her past, trapped in a world where the line between illusion and reality blurred. Her lament extended to her naive hope for the concept of a family here, yearning to escape the horrors awaiting her return. She pleaded for her release and stumbled, falling to the ground after colliding with a small rock. Tears welled in Ruby's eyes as she continued, expressing her unwillingness to endure this existence any longer. Her gaze lifted, and a dragon materialized before her, adding another layer to her thoughts. She considered whether this might be a better way out, a fleeting escape from the life that had become unbearable. Meanwhile, Isaac, witnessing the profound change in Ruby's expression, mused about the novelty of her current demeanor. He asked himself why she had chosen to remain by his side. Suddenly, an unusual sound diverted Isaac's attention, and the knights, equally astonished, inquired about its source. The enigmatic noise emanated from nearby. In that moment, the dragon scooped Ruby up in its talons and ascended into the sky. Isaac, resolute and unwavering, narrated his unwavering commitment to never abandon her, acknowledging that there were many things he might never comprehend. As the dragon soared higher, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that concealed their uncertain fate. Awakening from her slumber, Ruby's eyes widened in astonishment as she noticed the magnificent dragon lying beside her, its scales glistening in the soft morning light that filtered through the trees. Her racing thoughts grappled with the surrealness of the situation, leaving her to silently question how her life had brought her to this point. Her contemplations led her to consider the enigmatic dragon's presence and whether it had played a role in her survival. Its eyes held a depth of wisdom that belied her understanding, making her wonder if it was attempting to convey some form of solace or guidance. As Ruby's mind wandered, she couldn't help but reflect on the fate of her loyal companions, Popo and Griffin, who had risked everything to assist her in the past. The realization that she might have sustained an injury during her fall added a layer of concern to her thoughts. It was then that she examined a curious mushroom she had found, speculating on its potential use for her wound. Summoning newfound courage, Ruby reached out to the peculiar dragon, the warmth of its scales contrasting with the cool forest floor beneath her. She murmured words of acknowledgement, recognizing the uniqueness of their unlikely encounter. Suddenly, the tranquil moment was shattered by the abrupt appearance of Isaac, his inquiry about her hiding place slicing through the serene atmosphere. The dragon's menacing advance, its mighty roar, and Isaac's fiery accusations left Ruby feeling cornered and vulnerable. Desperation welled up within her as she implored for a halt, fearing for the dragon's safety and feeling a heavy weight of responsibility. In an impulsive attempt to divert Isaac's aggression, Ruby hurled the mushroom at his face, her heart pounding with anxiety about the unknown consequences of her actions. Regret quickly washed over her as she apologized for the force behind her throw. She then turned her attention back to the dragon, urging it to cease its hostility. Her mind raced with questions, uncertain about the reasons for Isaac's stillness and the dragon's role in this intricate web of events. Ruby, her thoughts woven into a tapestry of emotions, conveyed her bewildered state in the face of unfolding events and the enigma surrounding their motives. She delved into a profound contemplation about the plausibility of her unintentional departure, though the daunting challenge of persuading him loomed large in her mind. The weight of her admission pressed heavily upon her as she confessed her innocence in Lady Puriana's ordeal. The skepticism she expected in response hung in the air, and tears welled up in her eyes as she continued, unwittingly summoning those otherworldly creatures herself. Her plea carried an undertone of desperation, coupled with an unwavering commitment to accept any punishment that might come her way. Thus, she implored, even if it meant returning to Manhwa. In an unexpected turn, Isaac's fingers gently brushed against Ruby's face as his voice assumed a calm, reassuring tone. He offered a heartfelt promise not to let anyone brand her as a witch any longer, accompanied by a sincere apology. Ruby couldn't help but be intrigued by Isaac's sudden change of heart, recalling vividly how he had once despised her and considered her nothing more than a nuisance. She silently pondered whether he had conveniently forgotten that he had fervently wished for her disappearance. Isaac's response took a surprising twist as he suggested they head home, leaving Ruby momentarily stunned. As the dragon began to doze off, Isaac's embrace enveloped Ruby, offering words of solace that echoed through the cool evening air. Overwhelmed by a surge of emotions, Ruby found herself unable to stem the tide of her tears. She reflected on the torrent of feelings that swelled within her, impossible to conceal, especially as she faced him for the first time, cradled in his warm yet slightly awkward embrace. In this precious moment, as the falling snowflakes settled around them, everything seemed to be gradually finding its place, like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle coming together. Ruby, with her warm embrace and a concerned tone each time a fever was encountered, was the one who displayed such affection. The query regarding the choice to linger there, trapped in misery, prompted a confession of uncertainty. The deepest thoughts were voiced to a sister, yearning to understand if life could have unfolded differently with someone's confidence. A desire for a happier existence lingered, akin to an unspoken plea. One morning, as the room was awoken in, doubts lingered about whether he had truly been revived. Contemplation remained about remaining in that place, hesitant to move forward. Ellen, sensing unease, inquired about well-being. Reassurances were offered, though the air between them remained heavy. After a moment of silence, regret was expressed for having pressured on that fateful day. The guilt was dismissed, with insistence that it was all in the past. Ellen's regret stemmed from the guilt she carried for her mother's suffering, who had borne wounds on her arms during her final year. Her mother's health had deteriorated, and the trauma of witnessing her decline had left an indelible mark on Ellen. Her mother had pleaded with her not to reveal the truth to anyone, even at the cost of her own life. Ellen confessed that only a select few knew about her mother's illness. Consideration was given to how her mother's shadow had loomed over her, shaping her into the person she had become. Sharing the desire to confide in a husband about this revelation prompted Ellen's understanding. Surprisingly, a query arose about the existence of an older sister, catching off guard. However, it was quickly dismissed as mere nonsense. As the discussion continued, mention was made of Seo Yirong's reappearance, a hidden figure for so long. Thurendal had descended into chaos, and preparations had been made to address this emerging situation. It was evident that freedom to venture out alone would soon be lost. Pondering whether actions had unintentionally triggered these events persisted, although Isaac had remained silent on the matter. Ellen conveyed news about a collapse near the Dragon's Forest, where gemstones had been discovered. Her brother contemplated rewarding those responsible for the find. As reflections on the unfolding events continued, a sense of bewilderment washed over, leaving one questioning the true nature of the circumstances. The Duke conveyed to Isaac that there remained an unanswered enigma, prompted by the intricate international interests at play. He contemplated that perhaps arrangements should have been made for her earlier departure to Ramagna by sea, thereby circumventing potential complications. In response, Isaac, deep in thought, recognized the absence of an avenue for objection in the orchestration of this marriage, rendering him incapable of identifying the source of his inner turmoil. An individual interjected, expressing discontent over the disruption of the royal road for 4 days. Isaac firmly asserted her status as his wife, to which the individual acknowledged and commended Isaac's dedication while cautioning against the interference of emotions and sound judgment. The individual drew a comparison between Isaac's demeanor and that of his sister, Ellen, Subsequently, in his office, Longinus, the Paladin commander Baron, engaged in conversation with Isaac, expressing relief at Isaac's well-being. Isaac expressed gratitude but maintained a solemn demeanor. The commander inquired about Isaac's apparent seriousness, acknowledging that jubilation was not expected given the circumstances. Isaac, contemplative, asked if the commander's wife had ever contemplated leaving. The Baron chuckled and suggested that even if she had, it would be akin to visiting her parents, reflecting on why some men held on to wives who professed to despise them. Isaac conveyed that the matter was not so straightforward and wished for more open communication of feelings. With a smile, the Baron encouraged Isaac to cherish his time with his wife, even in the face of her disdainful gaze. Isaac remained uncertain about his next course of action, prompting the Baron to offer unwavering support and advice, emphasizing the importance of attending social events together and the need for introspection. He left Isaac with the task of finding his own answers. Amidst their discussions, a knight interposed, suggesting that Isaac should have notified the manager and addressed the situation within the group regarding their dealings with vigilantes. Isaac dismissed the suggestion, advising the knight to handle it personally. Tensions escalated as the knight accused Isaac of making threats, pointing to the involvement of the Borgia girl and stressing the gravity of the situation. Ivan proposed a more drastic solution, advocating for the elimination of the knight if he couldn't maintain silence. Another knight questioned the certainty that Ramagna bore no responsibility, to which Isaac responded by stating that Ramagna had denied involvement, speculating that the Divine Father-in-law might have plotted to seize the north through his daughter's cunning, and that this incident marked only the beginning. Isaac privately mused that he perceived this as a conspiracy on Ramagna's part, with complacency pervading all. The knight concurred with Isaac's assessment, acknowledging the need for discretion but expressing concerns about the future. Isaac pondered whether he could provide a satisfactory answer to such a complex query, reflecting on how children often mirrored their parents. He recalled the tragic fate of the Princess of Britannia and Grand Duchess of Omerta, who, despite lives of power and yearning, could not escape the abyss of misery and ultimately took their own lives. Isaac remembered being the one to discover his mother's lifeless body. Isaac recounted the intense passion that had once existed between them, detailing how it had transformed into an all-consuming fire, resulting in profound regret. The comprehension of the situation had always eluded him, and he admitted that he had never genuinely desired such understanding. However, a multitude of unanswered questions lingered in his thoughts, chief among them being his wish to reconnect with his mother, who had undergone a ghastly transformation into something akin to a ghoul. Despite his transition into a paladin, the persistently foolish behavior of his coworkers, who seemed to persist in their idiocy, bore heavily upon him. Even if he were to reunite with his mother, doubts persisted regarding his ability to effect meaningful change in her life or in the lives of those around him. The decision to terminate his impending marriage stemmed primarily from the blood coursing through his veins, instilling a fear of following in his mother's footsteps, and the weight of his newfound responsibilities as a paladin. Isaac bemoaned his affiliation with the Ramagna, a stark departure from his former self's path, which he had always envisioned as unchanged. The confrontation with, and even threat against, his colleagues troubled him deeply, leading him to question the coldness that had seemed to creep into his veins and its potential impact on his relationships. He was unsure if love had driven his actions or if it was some other, more profound force compelling him. As he grappled with his fears and hopes, he pondered who had influenced the transformation of someone he held dear. He also wondered whether Cardinal Valentino, a shadowy figure in his life, played a role in his sister's downfall. He realized these questions had long festered within him, left untouched, much like the collective avoidance of addressing them after his mother's passing. Isaac reached a breaking point emotionally, seizing a man by the neck, the man's sweat-drenched brow and trembling voice amplifying the tension in the room. The man implored for forgiveness, emphasizing the collective nature of their decisions, which had led to their current predicament. Isaac responded with a fervent wish for his dear one's safe awakening and a dire warning against any harm befalling her, his voice quivering with a mix of anger and desperation. Amidst his inner turmoil, he contemplated the anger enveloping those around him, yearning for a hint of selfishness and a semblance of normalcy in his life. He believed that, were it not for this anguish and the responsibilities that weighed him down, he might have been spared his current ordeal. His contemplations were disrupted when a crow, its ebony feathers glistening in the dim light, delivered a letter to a man, prompting him to read it with increasing curiosity, especially concerning someone named Ruby. The suspicious man, leaning in closer to his companion, lowered his voice as he conveyed the details of the 4-day search they had undertaken. His eyes darted around, ensuring no one overheard their conversation. In response, the other man leaned in, showing genuine concern, and admitted to being unsure about the contents of Nari's writings but was relieved to have heard that she had made it home safely. As the man continued speaking, he gazed out the window, his thoughts dwelling on the events of the past days. He elaborated, explaining that Nari's agitation stemmed from the situation itself, and he couldn't help but notice how greatly perturbed she had been by the unexpected turn of events. His companion, nodding in agreement, leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. Well, he mused, a clown drama is meant to have this sort of amusement, but this seems different. The man couldn't help but add more context to his earlier remarks, his voice tinged with regret. She's always been such a docile lady, he admitted, and who could have predicted it would cause such a commotion? I initially thought it was refreshing. You know, considering that you're her brother-in-law. The narrator of this story delved into the complexities of the brother-in-law's role, revealing how he had often felt discarded, like a scrap of paper. However, this time, things were different. He mentioned the formidable opposition he faced, including his own father, who had dispatched Ruby, and the northern Paladin, who claimed to be wed to his sister. The audacity of Ruby's marriage was an affront, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this clown drama felt sordid and unsettling. The suspicious man questions whether he can continue exercising his rights in his field despite certain circumstances. The other man responds, expressing frustration and implying that the first man has always been meticulous until he decided to pursue his own path. In Ruby's room, the doctor, a kindly figure, relayed his advice in a reassuring tone. He emphasized the importance of a healthy diet for her swift recovery, urging her to take daily strolls to regain her strength. Ruby, in her introspection, contemplated the full 10 days of her illness and the mystery surrounding the events. It seemed that aside from those who had accompanied her in Frostwood, no one else appeared to be privy to the details. In the tranquil garden, while sitting at the tea table, a group of children, their eyes wide with curiosity, approached Ruby with their questions about dragons in Ramagna. Ruby hesitated, her mind racing for an appropriate response. Just then, Isaac and his fellow knight, dressed in polished armor, approached. Ruby's heart races as she sees Isaac, realizing it's the first time since a significant event. She reflects on her emotions. Ivan respectfully greets her as Princess Ari, highlighting her good fortune. Ruby greeted everyone warmly, expressing her pleasure at seeing them and her concern for their well-being. Internally, she acknowledged her fear that they might still harbor animosity towards her from a past incident. Suddenly, Ruby's leg trembled, and she lost her balance, falling into the strong, supportive arms of Isaac. She expressed her gratitude towards him with a glance. Isaac expresses concern for Ruby's well-being and advises her to rest. Ruby, in turn, addresses a group of people and expresses her genuine delight at seeing them, acknowledging the hardships they've faced due to her actions. Little enthusiastically asks for cake, displaying her innocence and eagerness. Ivan, the responsible figure, advises her to be mindful of her manners, especially in front of others. Lee, however, remained defiant, drawing the attention of everyone present. Isaac, standing closer to Ruby, couldn't help but remark that she had received excellent care. Ruby, taken aback by Isaac's words, began to contemplate their implications, her heart pounding with uncertainty and curiosity. Thinking about the past event when Isaac escorted her back home, Ruby's mind drifted to the moment of her departure. A radiant gemstone had been bestowed upon her by the dragon, its facets shimmering like stars in the night sky. In the present, her gaze fixated on the glistening jewel, and a whirlwind of thoughts stirred within her. She traced her fingers along the gem's smooth surface, feeling the energy it held within. Could this gemstone be the very one gifted to her by the majestic storm dragon? She pondered silently. The gem seemed to pulse with a subtle, otherworldly glow, reinforcing her suspicions. With a sense of gratitude, Ruby expressed her thanks to Isaac, her words filled with sincerity and warmth. She extended the offer for him to keep the ruby, recognizing that it held a significant connection to their shared adventure. Acknowledging her gesture, Isaac replied in acceptance, his eyes reflecting a mix of appreciation and curiosity as he carefully pocketed the precious gem. As they sat together at the dining table, the aroma of the meal filled the room, making Ruby's stomach growl with anticipation. Isaac had prepared a sumptuous feast, featuring a variety of dishes that showcased his culinary skills. Ellen, chiming in, complimented the dish's tenderness and ease of consumption, her words adding a touch of culinary poetry to the ambience. While savoring the ruby, Ruby couldn't help but appreciate the delicious flavors that had tantalized her taste buds, a departure from her habitual anorexia. Each bite was a reminder of how her journey had awakened not only her sense of adventure, but also her appreciation for life's simple pleasures. In the conversation, Ellen raised a concern about the storm dragon, her voice tinged with a mix of fascination and worry. Ivan, ever the strategist, explained the feasibility of introducing the dragon to the temple's upcoming swordsmanship competition. Isaac expressed his reservations about capturing the majestic creature, considering the potential harm it could cause, his brow furrowing with concern. Ellen brought up the concern of attracting other dangerous monsters with more active dragons, her words carrying the weight of caution. A young girl, who had been quietly observing the conversation, sympathetically interjected, expressing pity for the dragon. Ruby silently concurred, reflecting on how the storm dragon had awakened because of her, a thought that weighed heavily on her conscience. Sensing Ruby's condition, Isaac inquired about her well-being and her fatigue, his concern evident in his gentle tone. Ruby explained that Sergei had advised her to limit her physical exertion, leaving her with limited mobility, her voice filled with a mix of frustration and resignation. Though he understood, Isaac found himself pondering why he always seemed to be in her company. Reaching out, Isaac gently held Ruby's hand, the contact a comforting reassurance of their connection. He expressed relief at her good health, his eyes softening with a hint of vulnerability, and Ruby couldn't help but contemplate the fragility of the moment and the consequences of any mistakes. Changing the topic, Isaac inquired about Ruby's friends who had escaped with her. Ruby recounted her encounters with Griffin in the forest and Popo at the horse racing festival, her words painting vivid images of their adventures. Isaac listened in silence, refraining from further questions, his eyes filled with a mix of understanding and respect for her privacy. Curious about her friends' well-being, Ruby finally asked about Popo and Griffin, her voice carrying a hint of concern and longing. Isaac reassured her that he had released them once he knew she was safe, prompting a sigh of relief from Ruby. Yet, Isaac continued to probe, asking if there was anything else she wished to share, especially regarding her time near the temple. He expressed a desire to learn more about her, his curiosity piqued by the enigmatic aspects of her journey. In the evening, Ruby found herself comfortably nestled in Isaac's lap, her attention fully captured as he shared his insights. In an indirect manner, it was observed that all creatures, including the formidable dragon, had once been nothing more than golden-breasted cubs. Even demons and entities bearing an uncanny resemblance to gold possessed a monster-like essence with only a slightly altered texture. These creatures, such as the ill-tempered monster bastard and the enigmatic undead species, held their own complexities. Reflecting on Isaac's words, Ruby pondered that the creature encountered in the forest differed significantly from Popo. It exuded an undeniable sense of danger. Conversely, the monsters that approached her exhibited more animalistic traits. Recollecting the incident from her first day at that place when the torch extinguished and she glimpsed a specter, Isaac informed her that it belonged to the undead species, despite appearing rather unintimidating and lacking in intellect. Inquiring about the peculiar boat spotted in the palace pond resembling the creatures, Ruby sought guidance from Isaac, who, while maintaining a sense of secrecy, responded, "This is the first time encountering someone like Ruby." Choosing to keep this knowledge concealed for the time being, advice on discretion was given. Contact with these creatures should be avoided, as they may potentially serve as allies in fleeing this place. Nevertheless, their true intentions continue to remain shrouded in uncertainty. Contemplating her concerns about Isuk's perception of her abilities, Ruby wondered whether she hailed from another world, endowed with these extraordinary gifts. Isaac posed a question, asking if she wished to inform her family, to which Ruby, taken aback, quickly declined. Isaac reassured her, "Then, Ruby, let our secret remain guarded between us for now." She inquired about his colleagues, and Isaac confidently replied, "They wear heavy disguises, so there's no need to worry." Unbeknownst to Ruby, she pondered Isaac's determination to put her at ease, suggesting that he might genuinely be on her side. Suddenly, a memory resurfaced in Isaac's mind where he had addressed Lorenzo, inquiring about the events that had transpired and the reason behind the disturbance caused in his vicinity, along with the nature of what had been revealed to his spouse. Lorenzo, visibly shaken, struggled to articulate a response, claiming ignorance. Isaac's fury surged, culminating in a forceful action as he pushed Lorenzo to the ground and administered a resounding slap to his face. With unwavering determination, he issued a stern warning, stating, "Lorenzo, heed my words carefully. Any future attempts to approach my wife will result in severe consequences, without hesitation." During the daytime, preparations were underway, keeping servants, maids, and various other individuals occupied. Ruby found herself contemplating the purpose behind all this activity. Duke, noticing Ruby's perplexity, made a remark, indicating that he was being treated as though his days were numbered. Ruby pondered why everyone's attention was focused on her, remaining unaware of the underlying reason. Isaac initiated a conversation with Ruby about the garden's beauty, inquiring if she had a preference for the lush grass. Ruby responded, mentioning the distinctiveness of this place compared to the south, with its captivating rugged charm. Isaac asked about southern gardens, to which Ruby provided details, explaining that they were abundant in flowers with a greater emphasis on blooms than trees. She mentioned features like cages, fountains, and even small waterfalls, which housed many exquisite and rare birds. Isaac likened it to an amusement park, to which Ruby playfully replied, acknowledging the delightful spectacle. She also noted the enchanting natural beauty of the current surroundings, comparing it to being in a forest, a sentiment with which Isaac concurred, emphasizing the abundance of greenery. Inwardly, Ruby was startled, contemplating her responses and carrying the weight of knowledge. Ellen joined the conversation, remarking on the previous desolation of this place and expressing her belief that the recent changes were for the better. Duke, however, voiced his reservations, suggesting that these alterations might be occurring too frequently. Ellen retorted, asking him to take action if he was dissatisfied, which left Duke feeling unheard. Ruby's thoughts drifted as she considered her father's perspective and his responsibility for maintaining order in Ramagna. She acknowledged that change could indeed pose challenges. Duke turned his attention to Ruby, commenting on her significantly improved health. Ruby expressed her gratitude for everyone's care, and the Duke urged a swift resolution to any remaining major issues, emphasizing Ruby's comfort. Ruby felt a slight shift in her surroundings and, shortly afterward, a cheerful girl introduced herself as Rona. Ellen explained that Rona was a child recommended by a relative, still quite young, with tender hands, and would be a great help. Ruby thanked Ellen, appreciating the gesture, and Ellen confessed that this should have been done sooner. She and her brother believed that having young servants would be more comfortable for Ruby, gradually increasing the staff in the future. Ruby acknowledged the advantage but found it challenging to adapt, relieved that she no longer needed to bribe Lucille. She warmly greeted Rona, offering her best wishes for success in her future service. Rona pledged her dedication and vowed to give her best effort. Ellen advised Rona that she would become busy quickly, assisting Ruby in preparing for the Gladiator Fight Festival banquet. Ruby inquired about the nature of the banquet, and Ellen revealed that it was an exclusive event in Ruby's honor. Rona would help with Ruby's attire, eliminating the need for concern. Ruby was somewhat astonished and exclaimed, questioning if she was truly the center of attention. Ellen confirmed it, assuring Ruby that if any issues arose, her brother would take responsibility. Ruby hesitated, reflecting on the nuances of her social standing, realizing that after Freya, her reputation had likely diminished. Hosting a banquet in her name under these circumstances left her perplexed.